My nephew knocked my graduation cake straight off the table with one shove of his hand. Frosting sprayed over the patio stones, candles tumbled and rolled under people's shoes, and the boy turned to me with a grin and said, "Go ahead, lick it off the concrete, Aunt Daisy." Everyone at that table burst out laughing. My own mother laughed louder than anyone else. I just stood there holding the cake knife, asking myself how a family that claimed to love me could sound so vicious. I didn't say anything. I turned and walked into the night while their laughter trailed behind me. Hours later, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "We're done with you. Don't ever contact us again." My sister hit the like button on it within seconds. I typed back exactly one sentence. That single reply set off everything that came after. The yard had been dressed up like something from a home magazine. String lights overhead, the smell of grilled meat drifting through the warm Idaho evening, everyone laughing and mingling. To anyone passing by, it would have looked like the picture of a happy family reunion. But holding a paper plate in my hand, I could feel the tension simmering just under the surface, the kind nobody dared mention out loud. My mother, Linda, drifted between guests wearing her practiced hostess smile. My sister Amanda sat at the center of attention in a brand new floral sundress, her son Liam glued to her side, basking in a spotlight that had never once landed on me. "Tell everyone about Florida," a guest urged her. Amanda tossed her hair back and laughed. "Oh, it was incredible. Mom made us stay an extra week." My mother nodded along, feigning modesty. "Well, they've worked hard. They earned it." I smiled, the practiced smile people wear when it's expected of them. Nobody asked how things were going for me up in Seattle. Nobody brought up my degree. The cake sat off to the side of the table, white icing, blue script reading, "Congratulations, Daisy," wedged in next to a stack of napkins and a few half-finished soda cans. Every time someone brushed past it, it wobbled slightly, as if its place at the table didn't really matter. I found myself staring at it longer than I should have. It looked exactly like me in that yard, pretty, present, and completely overlooked. A gust of wind moved through the yard and made the lights sway gently. For one hopeful second, I thought maybe tonight would be different, that maybe they'd actually surprise me. Then Liam came barreling toward the dessert table, a wicked little smile on his face. "Aunt Daisy," he announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mom says you only got your degree so you could show off." The laughter that followed was harsh and cutting. My mother said nothing to stop him. Amanda tried, and failed, to hide her smirk behind her wine glass. I thought about every time I'd been the one expected to give things up, to make sacrifices, to be the tough one, who never needed comforting, never complained. My throat tightened, but I forced the feeling back down. Then Liam's hand connected with the edge of the cake plate, and everything slowed down. Porcelain shattered against the patio stones, frosting sprayed across my shoes, and the gasps from the crowd dissolved right back into laughter. I stood frozen, still gripping the knife I'd been using to cut slices. Nobody told him to apologize, not even my father, who barely glanced up from his phone. The last thing I heard before I left was my mother's voice, light and entertained. "Oh, relax, Daisy. Don't make a scene." I put the knife down, untied my apron, and headed for the door. My footsteps felt impossibly loud against the wood of the deck. Their laughter chased me out like a song from a celebration I was never really part of. The night air outside hit colder, the sky already darkening to bruise purple. I climbed into my car and pulled away without a single goodbye. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. Something inside me had quietly, permanently broken, and I knew there'd be no putting it back together. I drove through hours of dark Idaho highway that night, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. The party kept replaying in my mind on a loop. The clatter of dishes, my mother's careless voice telling me not to be so sensitive. By the time I reached my place in Seattle, it was well past midnight. The city outside was hushed, rain tracing lines down the windows. I dropped my keys, kicked my shoes off, and let the quiet settle over me. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. For one foolish moment, I let myself hope it might be an apology. Instead, the words cut deeper than the knife I'd been holding hours earlier. "We're done with you. Don't ever contact us again." A small heart reaction popped up underneath it a moment later, Amanda approving the message. I stared at my own reflection, glowing faintly in the dark screen. There was no tightness in my chest, no tears, just numbness, like my body had finally given up trying to prove it could still hurt. I opened my laptop, the screen casting blue light across the room, and pulled up an old spreadsheet. My budget tracker. 2 lines stared back at me. My parents' mortgage, $400 a month. Amanda's SUV payment, $640 a month. Both loans carried my signature as co-borrower. Both amounts had been pulled automatically from my account for 3 straight years. I'd signed those papers because my mother told me, "You're the dependable one, sweetheart, and just help your family out." Back then, it had felt like love. Now it looked like a chain. Rain kept tapping against the glass, uneven, like a countdown clock. I scrolled back through years of messages, polite thank yous, guilt trips, disguised as updates, endless excuses. Just until Amanda's business takes off. "Your father's between jobs again. We'll catch up on it next month." Next month had never once arrived. The heaviness in my chest shifted into something else entirely. Not grief anymore, but clarity. I opened a new message, typed slowly, every word deliberate, like closing a door one final time. "Remove my name from both loans first thing tomorrow." No emojis, no explanation needed. I hit send, set the phone face down, and poured myself a glass of water, watching condensation slide down the side of the glass. For once, silence didn't feel like defeat. It felt like control. They wanted me gone. Fine. This time, they'd be the ones left feeling the absence. Morning broke gray and cold, the kind of Seattle sky that scrubs everything clean-looking. I made coffee and watched the steam curl upward, thinking about how things end. Not with screaming, but with one short message. I hadn't slept a wink, yet I felt strangely alert, the exhaustion having burned itself out into something close to calm. By 9 a.m., my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My mother, my father, Amanda, even unknown numbers from back in Boise. Close to 100 missed calls. The family group chat exploded with accusations and guilt. "You've crossed a line. Do you understand what you're doing to this family? We raised you." Not one of those messages said sorry. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I pulled on a gray sweater, tied my hair up, and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys before I typed, "Green First Bank, Downtown Seattle Branch." I met Mr. Diaz in a small consultation room with pale blue walls and a single potted fern. He looked to be in his 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ms. Wilson," he said, shaking my hand, "I went through what you sent over. I think I understand the situation." I sat across from him, hands folded together. I co-signed 2 loans, one for my parents' house, one for my sister's SUV. "I've been the one paying on both for years. I want out." He nodded slowly. "You wouldn't be the first person taken advantage of in the name of family." He slid a stack of papers toward me. "If you can show you hold no ownership stake in either property, we can begin the liability release immediately. You can also freeze any shared credit access." I handed over the folder I'd brought, lease documents, payment records, emails, even an old text from my mother that read, "The house is ours. You just helped sign for it." He read through everything in silence, then looked up. "This is everything we need." He picked up the phone and called legal. "Let's start the co-borrower removal for Daisy Wilson, effective immediately." The click of his pen sounded small but felt seismic to me. My hands shook as I signed page after page, each signature cutting another invisible thread that had bound me for years. When he stamped the final document, the sound echoed through the small room. He looked at me with something close to warmth. "You did the right thing, Ms. Wilson. Sometimes protecting yourself is the only way people learn to respect your limits." Outside, the wind was sharp against my face, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. I stopped at a cafe on the corner, and when the barista handed me my coffee and said, "Have a good day," I looked her in the eye and meant it for the first time in longer than I could remember. I will. That night, cooking dinner alone in my kitchen, my phone buzzed again, the family group chat lighting up with fury. How could you destroy our credit? You're heartless. You're going to regret this. I typed one short reply. I simply stopped paying for people who laughed while my cake hit the ground. I hit send and set the phone aside. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was freedom. 3 days later came the knock, sharp, angry, relentless, rattling the thin walls of my apartment. I froze mid-step, a pot of pasta hissing on the stove behind me. Something cold settled in my stomach even before I checked the video intercom. My mother and Amanda stood on the screen, their faces twisted with fury I'd never seen, directed at me quite like that. My mother's mouth was a tight, furious line, arms crossed like she was bracing for a lecture. Amanda's eyes were red-rimmed, her mask hanging loosely around her neck. "Daisy!" My mother's voice rang out, sharp and shaking. "Open this door right now. We need to talk. What did you do to the bank?" I didn't move. Through the camera, I could see them shifting nervously as a neighbor peeked into the hallway. Amanda's voice climbed, desperate. "You ruined everything. The bank froze our accounts. Mom's credit is gone. They're about to take my car. You think this is funny?" Funny? That word stung. Not because of what she meant, but because that's exactly how my whole life with them had always felt. Like a joke. Like the strong one wasn't allowed feelings of her own. I took a slow breath, steadied my voice, and opened the recorder on my phone. "Seattle Police," I said quietly into the non-emergency line. "2 people are outside my apartment yelling and won't leave. I'd like to report trespassing." "Do you know them?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes," I said, eyes still on the monitor. "They're my family. But right now, they're just people refusing to respect my boundary." Outside, the pounding grew louder. Amanda slammed her palm against the door. "Daisy, you're tearing this family apart. You think cutting us off makes you strong? You're selfish, heartless." My mother's voice cracked between rage and panic. "We're your parents. You don't treat family like the enemy." 10 minutes later, red and blue light washed over the street below. 2 officers appeared on the intercom screen, calm and businesslike. They approached my mother first. I watched her rush toward them, pointing furiously at my door. "She's my daughter. She wrecked our finances. We just want to talk to her." Amanda broke into sobs. "She nearly cost me my car. My fiancé is threatening to leave because of what she's done to my credit. She's heartless." One officer raised his hand gently. "Ma'am, this is private property. If she's asked you to leave, you need to go." "She's my child," my mother shouted. "I have rights." "You have rights as a parent," he answered, "but not the right to trespass on an adult's home." The camera shook slightly as Amanda stepped back, her face crumpling. For one brief second, guilt flickered through me, familiar and fleeting. Then I remembered the frosting on the pavement, the laughter, the silence that came after. "No," I told myself, "not again." I spoke quietly, just loud enough for the intercom mic to catch it. If they're acting like intruders, then there's no line left between family and a boundary. The officer glanced toward the camera and gave a small nod, as if he understood without needing more explanation. He motioned toward the stairs. "This conversation's over. Let's go." My mother turned back toward the door one last time, eyes burning. "You'll regret this, Daisy. Blood doesn't just disappear because you say so." I didn't answer. The door stayed shut. They left under the flashing lights, their footsteps fading heavily down the stairwell. When quiet finally returned, it felt like air flooding back into a room that had been sealed for years. I slid down against the wall, phone still recording, hands shaking. Not from fear this time, but release. I saved that recording under the name Boundaries, April 17th. That night, I stood at my window watching the city breathe below me, headlights streaking across wet pavement, people somewhere laughing over coffee, living their ordinary lives. And in that quiet apartment, an entire family had quietly come apart without a single scream. The next morning, my inbox filled up again, this time with messages I hadn't seen coming. My mother had posted on Facebook in bold lettering, "Sometimes the child you trust the most hurts you the worst." Daisy stole from her own parents and wrecked our credit. Some people never learn gratitude. Dozens of comments piled up beneath it from old neighbors, distant relatives, people I barely remembered. So ungrateful. Poor Linda, after everything she's done. And then, one that really cut, I heard she used her parents' money to buy that apartment in Seattle. I read it all without flinching. The old version of me would have panicked, typed out long defensive explanations, begged people to believe her side. Instead, I just breathed. They were throwing fire, but I had no intention of burning. I wrote a short professional email to my coworkers instead. "Hi team. If you happen to see rumors about me online, please disregard them. Some people respond to boundaries with lies. I'm fine, and I appreciate your discretion." Then I shut my laptop. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. 3 days later, an envelope showed up at my office, stamped with the green First Bank letterhead. Inside was a signed letter from Mr. Diaz confirming that I'd been fully released from all liability on both the mortgage and the vehicle loan tied to my mother's and sister's names. The gold seal at the bottom caught the light as I ran my fingers across it, tracing the line of my own signature, the exact moment everything had shifted. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. That evening, the Facebook post vanished. Maybe someone finally told my mother the truth, or maybe the bank had to step in to verify it. Either way, I'd stopped needing their approval to feel at peace. Still, my phone buzzed once more, a number I hadn't saved in months. "You'll pay for this, Daisy. You think you've won?" I smiled faintly. Winning had never been the point. Freedom was. I stood at my window, the Seattle skyline spreading out like a map of fresh starts, the air smelling like rain and coffee. For the first time, I felt completely unburdened. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's power finally finding its own voice. The weeks that followed were quiet. No more late-night calls, no more whispers on Facebook. The silence that used to terrify me had become something closer to peace. I threw myself into work at Green Pulse Tech and finished a project that earned me a quiet promotion. My CEO, Lydia, told me during one meeting, "Daisy, you lead with steadiness. People notice that." It was the first compliment I'd ever received that came with no strings attached. At home, life settled into its own rhythm. Yoga classes, soup simmering on the stove in the evenings, laughter with friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could offer them. Elena showed up one day with flowers. Marcus teased me about the cactus on my windowsill, joking that it looked just like me. Calm, but don't get too close. Then one morning, Mr. Diaz sent me a photo, my release document framed and hanging in the bank's compliance office. "We use it as a teaching example for boundary protection," his message read. I smiled into my coffee. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's safety net, wasn't anyone's silent backbone. I was just Daisy, whole, free, finally belonging to no one but myself. A year later, a single text from Amanda lit up my phone. "I'm sorry for everything. No excuses, no explanation, just 5 words." I read it a few times, then set the phone down without responding. I'd come to understand that forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening a door. Sometimes it just means closing it gently and walking away in peace. Outside, Lake Union shimmered under the evening light, calm and endless. I breathed in the cool Seattle air and whispered to myself, "Welcome home, Daisy." If you've ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you most just to find yourself again, you're not alone. Share your own story in the comments and subscribe for the next one.